Prior to the independence, the education in this period was typical of feudal societies. At the time, only the royalties and nobility had the benefits of formal education. During the British colonial period, the main goal of the British was to maintain peace and order, as this was done to further the exploitation of the economic resources of Malaya, especially tinned rubber. At the time, there was no clear policy on the education system. Due to the divide of race and rule policy, the British did not intend to establish rapport between the different races in Malaya through a standardized education system. Eventually, each ethnic group had to be educated in their very own language, as they had to learn to accept their roles in society or life. As a result, 4 different types of schools emerged: the English medium, the Malay medium, the Chinese medium, and lastly the Tamil medium. During the 1880s and early 1890s, the education was made compulsory by the British government, as students were taught with the basic of reading, writing, and arithmetic as well.
British developed new colonial education for political and economic gain. The development of a new education policy in Malaya was implemented by the British to achieve the true goal. There are 3 main goals of education during the colonization, which offers the school's purpose is to socialize children with foreign values rather than native values. Secondly, each school appointed a small group of indigenous people to meet their specific goals. Lastly, the workforce requirements to operate the schools are at the minimum and lowest level. The implementation was done for the purpose of political and economic gain rather than for the benefits for Malaya. Other than that, Malaya also gained some benefits due to this new education. For example, the education system is more systematic and everyone has the chance to go to school. This way, the British can maintain a peaceful situation in Malaya. However, the other reason for the new development of colonized education in Malaya is that citizens are able to meet the needs of the workforce and economy while working for the British.
The British established the new school system as a social tool in order to gain a set of control over the Malays and how the Malays can benefit them. There were Chinese vernacular schools solely taught about China, whereas Tamil vernacular schools only taught about India. As a result, Chinese and Indian children are more equipped for life in China and India rather than in Malaya. English schools are exclusively found in cities. Students who studied English were rewarded well, while others were not. The schools at the time was dedicated to a certain race, and the schools were divided from one another by geography and population distribution. The process of socialization among all races is not performed, hence there is no sense of patriotism towards Malaya as a whole, but rather for their race and ethnic group.
The continued provision of English schools in the 19th century by the government and missionary bodies, aided by relatively generous financial grants. Malay boys who successfully completed 4 years of Malay vernacular education before the age of 11 were assisted in various ways to profit from an English education that was made free for them. The policy of completing the vernacular education before pursuing English education is a way to preserve the native customs and traditions by the government. English education ascended over vernacular education due to adoption of English as the official language of the Straits Settlements and the Federated Malay States. The choice of English as the only medium of instruction at a secondary and post-secondary level, deserving of support out of public funds, and the growing demand in the first 2 decades of this century for English-educated subordinate clerks in the administrative and commercial service.
All in all, British colonization changed Malaya's education system from a non-formal education system to a formal education system. This colonization led to the establishment of vernacular schools, namely Malay Vernacular School, Chinese Vernacular School, Tamil Vernacular School, and English School. However, the field of study that was practiced in Chinese and Tamil vernacular schools emphasized nothing about Malaya, since the teachers and textbooks were imported from China and India. As a result, it failed to develop the personality of Malaya among Chinese and Indians. Due to the separation of education among ethnicities, it widens the gaps among them. The establishment of English schools discriminates against ethnicities in Malaya, where it can only be attended by those who can afford to pay high fees and live in cities. However, in order to preserve the culture and values of each ethnicity, the policy to complete vernacular education first before pursuing English education was implemented. On the brighter side, British colonization in education assisted and trained Malayans to meet at least minimum requirements for the workforce, despite some of British goals intended to introduce foreign values through education.
The formation of a multi-ethnic society and the establishment of vernacular school was the result of British policy. However, the establishment of the policies have resulted in few impact to the society. Firstly, Tamil and Chinese child are not exposed with the indigenous people in Malaysia, as the vernacular schools do not provide them with Malay-oriented matters and environment. Next, the education system contributes to the racism among the society. This is because the schools have also become institutions for the children to focus on their race and separate them from one race to another, and it is difficult for the children to mingle with each other. In addition, the colonization has made the society have achieved a new social standard as well as a new culture, and schools are no longer a place for children to socialize in the society, but for them to adapt with the foreign society. To conclude, the colonial education in Malaya during the British colonial period taught us many lessons and gave us opportunity to understand and learn more about how the policy were developed and the reasons behind it. In a nutshell, we can learn and reflect our education system today from the colonization period, especially the policy of education, and assist us to improve the education system in Malaysia in the future without discriminating other races and live peacefully in a multiracial society.